Welcome to Discover Truth Bite-Sized. Today I want you to read along with me in Acts chapter 7 and verse number 35. This Moses whom they refused, saying, Who made thee a ruler and a judge? The same did God send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush. As Stephen stands at his feet to deliver his very last sermon in front of that council, he did so by giving them a potted history and taking through the early part of the Old Testament, through the life of Moses. Moses was a man who lived for 120 years. For the first 40 he lived in the palace thinking he was somebody. For the second 40 he was in the backside of the desert and he thought he was a nobody. For the final 40 years of his life he learned that God could use anybody. He was a man who was misunderstood and a man who was rejected, just as the Lord Jesus Christ was a man who was misunderstood, and too he was rejected and crucified and put to death. You see, Moses thought it was his time to be the deliverer. He saw an Egyptian and a Jewish person, he saw them arguing and quarrelling, and he thought he would intervene, and it ended up in the death of the Egyptian. Then he saw two Jewish people, he saw them arguing and quarrelling, and he thought he would intervene to help. Instead of being a deliverer, they pointed the finger at him. And they said to him, What if you came along, do you plan on killing us also? He had been spotted. In his act of manslaughter, he had been seen, and this caused him to flee and to leave Egypt and to go off into the desert. He was misunderstood. He thought God had put a calling upon his life. He thought he was a chosen deliverer, but it was the wrong time. But then the time had come. The time had come for him to return and to do the thing that God had called him to do. He returned back to issue those 10 plagues on behalf of the Lord, and God used him in a mighty and in a wonderful way to deliver his people, to take them out of slavery and to lead them towards the promised land. God had a plan and he had a will for his life, something that he wanted him to do. You see, maybe Moses thought to himself that 40 years out in the wilderness, maybe he thought that was a wasted 40 years. There he was just looking after the flocks. But that was 40 years of learning. 40 years from learning at the hand of God. 40 years for learning how to handle flocks of sheep. But little did he know that he was going to be looking after millions of men and women, leading them towards that promised land. A time of learning had come for Moses. A time of transformation of mind. A man who was misunderstood. A man who was rejected. But ultimately it was a man who God chose to use. How wonderful it is to think that you're a man or a woman, a boy or a girl, and God has chosen. He has chosen you with a task for you to perform. I wonder, are you learning at his feet? And are you being faithful about the task that God has given unto you?